All right, everybody, hello and welcome to the Reserve Team. Second video on the channel. It's something a little bit different today. We had our Reserve Team podcast go up earlier in the week, but this time we're going to be doing the Reserve Team rankings, a new tier list show where we look to take little bits and bobs of information, little different comparisons between clubs, between stadiums, whatever else around the A-League and Australian and New Zealand football, and look to put them into God tier status, decent status, needs improvement, or get in the bin if it's something that we don't want to see any further in and around Australian football. I'm not alone though. I'm joined today by Branson Gibson. Thanks very much for joining me, mate.
G'day, Sean. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. Nice, nice day, nice afternoon. Not that we can do too much, but we were saying before we started recording, this one's going to be kind of like a time capsule that we look back on as one of the first episodes. And it's a weird time in the world as well, like lockdown, COVID, all that sort of stuff that's kind of keeping us stuck inside. The opportunity to talk about football with you for a little bit sounds like a really good way to spend the afternoon.
Whole lot of my day, mate. Can't wait.
So, as I mentioned at the start, we're going to be looking at A-League stadiums in today's episode. We have set ourselves some rules as to what we want to look for in those stadiums. Now, full disclosure, because it's always better to tell you guys up front exactly where we're at and exactly what we're looking to do, we haven't been to every single one of these stadiums combined. We have been to most of them, and once we get into the actual A-League stadiums, we do have the majority of them covered, but a few that we're going to go through are, regional stadiums that teams went to one time to try and build their fan bases, stadiums like the first one that you can see on your screen, which we'll talk about in a moment, that we use just for capacity reasons for big matches. So there are a few which we will tell you about that we're going to rate and review based on the stadium quality, the current current quality of the stadium itself. When was it recently built? When was it last refurbished? Whatever else. The atmosphere created inside that environment, because even though we may not have physically been there, you can always tell if a stadium has good atmosphere, if the stands are packed, if there's colour, if there's noise. Its suitability for football, and ovals are going to be a big part of that, and they're definitely going to be something that I'm probably going to rant 2 or 3 times about throughout the course of the episode. And then also the TV viewing experience, because there are quite a few stadiums which are very, very good, but trying to watch games in those environments can be incredibly difficult. We'll talk a little bit further about Seagulls once we get to a few of the stadiums in and around Melbourne specifically as well. Bran, anything that you wanted to hit up or mention before we get stuck into A-League stadiums, just around general overall quality for most of the locations that we're going to talk about today?
I'll probably just, the one thing that I mentioned is in between the top 2 tiers, it's going to be hard to distinguish some of these stadiums. We're going to probably upset a few people. It's going to be a pretty fine line for some of them, in particular the ones that we haven't been to yet. But those ones we'll put on the hit list, and we'll get to them soon enough, I reckon. And
we of course anticipate thousands of all caps lock comments in the comment section below. If you disagree with our rankings, if you've got your own ideas, if there are stadiums that we've missed and that you would like to see included, if we ever do revisit this topic, by all means throw it down in the comment section below. Your opinions are as valid as our uneducated opinions are as well. So first, before we do get stuck in, we've got some honourable mentions. These are either regional stadiums that we used once or twice that we really don't need to talk that much further about because they don't have a lot of the different things that we're looking to grade stadiums on, or they are stadiums that have since been demolished, either being replaced by new stadiums or going to be turned into something completely different. The first one is Carrington Park. Sydney FC played here. It's in Bathurst, New South Wales. Capacity of 13,000. It hasn't been used since. It will be interesting to see if it is used again, if they have returned to Bathurst as a regional game. The next, Glen Willow Regional Sports Stadium. Western Sydney Wanderers played there in Mudgee, New South Wales. 10,000 attended. It is very much like a Sunday pickup park level type arena. Lavington Sports Ground in Albury, one day Melbourne Heart played out there. I think it was like a 42-degree day. It says the capacity on their webpage is 20,000. It's definitely not. It's just a big cricket oval in the middle of the country. Latrobe City Stadium, Melbourne Heart also played there in Morwell, Victoria, 12,000 capacity. That one's a little bit bigger, but it's, again, only been used the one time. Port Macquarie Regional Stadium was used by the Newcastle Jets in Port Macquarie. Pirtek Stadium, of course, the previous home of Western Sydney Wanderers in the western suburbs of Sydney, and Olympic Park Stadium, the original home of Melbourne Victory for Season 1 of the A-League. We're not going to go into too much detail with any of those, mainly because they have been superseded. But first, As our first group, we're going to go through former or unique stadiums. This is pretty much going to be almost a quick fire round between the two of us. We're not going to delve into too much detail relating to these ones. We'll just introduce the stadium. We'll talk about what it was used for, whether it was a unique stadium based on capacity, whether it's a former stadium because a club has moved or they've just gotten out of that relationship and that arrangement. There's a couple of very interesting ones in here and a couple of very unique ones. You'll see Wellington bopping up like 4 or 5 different times because they're trying to represent the whole of New Zealand. But there are some very unique venues that I think will come up in this list, including for former clubs in the A-League, that it would be good to see come up again. The first one that we're going to look at is Adelaide Oval. Of course, Adelaide Oval's been used a couple of times as the kind of expanded capacity ground for Adelaide United. They did have their 2015 grand final triumph in that stadium. Bran, what are your immediate thoughts on Adelaide Oval as we're looking at it here?
As a stadium itself, I think it's top notch. I mean, one of the factors that we mentioned before was, the quality of the stadium. I think no one can dispute that. The new grandstand, the hill. It's a great place to watch footy, great place to watch cricket. Don't know if it suits much as an A-League venue. I mean, it's an oval. As you said, we're probably going to rant quite a few times about how the effect that ovals have for rectangular sports. So I think for that reason, it's never going to reach God status simply because it's the wrong shape. But the one redeeming feature that I like is it does seem to only be, as a capacity-driven stadium. Like the grand finals only play there. Adelaide United still play almost all of their home games at Hindmarsh. So from that point of view, I reckon I can stomach it. How about you?
Yeah, look, if I'm being honest, I think we're going to get into a scenario when we talk about quite a few of the A-League clubs just based on their capacity and kind of, as you mentioned, Hindmarsh being a really good boutique stadium. I don't think Adelaide Oval is a bad stadium, so to speak, but when you take into account for Adelaide United wanting to try and get a stadium full of 50,000 people, it really is their only option at the moment. I know, there's a couple of potential other locations. I know there's probably a dream scenario, which we'll talk about further when we look at the current stadiums about, expanding the capacity at Hindmarsh. I think for me, the highest we could put this needs improvement. Not because it isn't, a fantastic quality stadium, not because it didn't have fantastic atmosphere for that 2015 grand final when it was a sellout crowd. It's an oval. It's not suitable for football. The TV viewing experience, you're miles away from it. Even sitting in the crowd, you would be miles away from a square in the middle of the pitch. And there's nothing worse, I think, from a spectator capacity, be it in TV or in the ground, to say I'm still 100 metres away from the touchline, which is what I think kind of keeps this one. I think it'll be towards the top of needs improvement, but I don't think we could put it any higher than that as things currently stand.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, the first two factors, stadium quality and atmosphere, are there. Atmosphere because you can jam more people in, more noise, but suitability, it's an oval, so it's not very suitable. And then TV experience, again, being an oval, when you're watching it on TV, you've got the sideline and then you see a bunch of grass. It's tough to fit in actual fans in the grandstand, in the viewing picture.
I think we get the ball rolling with needs improvement. We will talk about, as we get through more of these, maybe it sits towards the top end of needs improvement. We will put these in order as well. Maybe the worst one in decent. It's sitting somewhere hovering around these two, I think. But for the fact that it is an oval, it's not a specialist, rectangular or football stadium, I think we throw it in needs improvement, just based on some of the other different stadiums that we're going to be looking at throughout the course of this episode. Moving on to the next one. Number 2, Allianz Stadium. It's got sort of a different conflated view with a variety of different supporters. Long-time fans of Sydney FC look back on it very fondly. It is where the Cove was originally kind of created and built. Sydney, of course, moving into a new stadium in the next couple of seasons as well. What are your immediate thoughts, Bran, on Allianz Stadium in Sydney?
Well, I've never been there, but I've got a weird opinion on it. I think, previously I would have thought, it's fine. The capacity, 45,000 is probably a little bit big. Sydney FC aren't getting 45,000 to every game. Of course, hosting bigger games, they'd be, nearer to that figure. So before a couple of years ago, I'd probably have it in the close to top rank, but I think seeing Sydney move to some smaller ovals that we'll get into, smaller stadiums that we'll get into later, they just seem more suitable than Allianz. So I think the fact that they've found other stadiums that are better or more appropriate, I think that sort of bumps it down a little bit for me. What do you think?
Look, I'd agree. I think it goes into the decent category. And I think, again, when we put other stadiums in alongside it, maybe it kind of sits in that mid-tier decent level where, yes, it's a rectangular stadium. Yes, it has really good capacity. Yes, the seats are sky blue for the home side. That sort of stuff is just the little 1 and 2% things that I think make a stadium a little bit better. But is it an ideal football specific space? No, not really. It is still, I think, one of the better ones in the league. But I think once we start talking about the all-star elite level stadiums, their atmosphere is a lot better. Their suitability for the game's good, the stadium quality is good, the TV experience is a lot better. Every game that's played there looks like it's a big spectacle. But I think it sits kind of firmly within the decent category. I don't think it's quite amongst what we'd call the god tier of A-League stadiums in and around Australia and New Zealand.
I agree.
Perfect. All right, we're aligned so far. No conflict to speak of at all. Looking forward now to AAMI Stadium. This is the first appearance for New Zealand. There's a couple of different New Zealand sides that you'll see come up here. This one's based in Christchurch, down in New Zealand. Wellington use it as a kind of a regional facility when they tour in and around. Of course, that depends on their scheduling every year. It depends on different restrictions in and around the country. Again, it looks solid. It doesn't look super spectacular. This is the first, I think, stadium we've come across that neither of us have been to. It's got a nice hill at the back there as we're looking at the image here. It's got 2 full stands. It is sort of semi-rectangular in that it does have 2 flat ends based on rugby league or cricket or whatever else they happen to be hosting. I think we would put this in a needs improvement type category, if I'm being completely honest with you, Brian. I think a lot of these ones that are regional specific, I understand why they have to be multi-purpose venues. But being based in Christchurch, it's good to have Wellington have this available to them, but I don't think we put it, amongst the top category of stadiums available.
Yeah, I agree. And it does hold cricket matches as well. So you can see it's sort of got that curvature so they can fit an oval or a more... so they can play oval-based sports in it as well. I think, again, the redeeming feature is for Wellington, it is only an every now and then home. So I think that, again, that sort of saves them a little bit.
Yeah, and maybe, this is future spoilers and we should never get into future spoiler territory, maybe looking at some of the other stadiums in use by Wellington in and around New Zealand kind of puts this one in that needs improvement category. We'll talk about those further once we get to them. The next one, ANZ Stadium, again in Sydney, a very big stadium. It's got huge capacity. Is this the same as Allianz?
No, separate. So this is the Olympic Stadium.
Of course, this is the old Homebush, right?
Yeah. Always getting confused. So this is the Olympic Stadium. So this One's got a huge capacity, 83,000. I think the capacity for this one is. I think I don't know. It's a weird one because when you look at the stadium quality, I haven't been there, but from all intensive purposes, it was built for the Olympics. It regularly hosts rugby games, whether it's rugby league or rugby union. The Socceroos, I think that's where they play most of their games. So in terms of stadium quality, it's pretty good. In terms of atmosphere, if it's full, it seems to be buzzing, but again, I just don't think from an A-League point of view, I don't think they've ever come close to getting a crowd of 83,000, even at grand finals. I don't know. So
was it Homebush where the Socceroos World Cup playoff was in 2005?
Yes. Yeah, where we've been Uruguay. Pretty sure. Yeah. So
this is where this becomes difficult, right? On that night, completely full, fantastic stadium, fantastic environment, fantastic atmosphere. Yep. So even though we know that Sydney FC aren't going to get a crowd of 83,000, let's say we put on our ideal dream bubble scenario for 10 years from now, where football's the biggest game in the country and every grand final's a sellout and all the derbies and all that sort of stuff. I think we would put this in the All-Star tier, but I think we're probably talking towards the bottom of the All-Star tier. But I only say that based on if this stadium was full, week in, week out, 80,000 people in it, it's rectangular, it's built in the year 2000 or for the year 2000. That's not ancient in terms of some of the overall grounds that we're going to talk about. Its capacity is huge. Its TV experience is great because everyone remembers watching that 2005 playoff for the Socceroos. And, I don't think when we look at our rules, and maybe I should have made them a bit broader, maybe we should have 15 or 16 different layers to these rules. But I think looking at it, potentially we have our first all-star stadium there and available.
Well, I think it should come with a bit of a disclaimer because, when we talk about suitability, is it suitable for grand finals and Socceroos World Cup qualifiers? Yes. Is it suitable for a round 14 Sydney FC game against Western United? Probably not. So,
all right,
I think I agree with you where it's probably top tier, but it's going to be down the very bottom because when it would be used to its full potential is very, very rare.
Let's put it at the top of decent. And then let's have the ability, once we compare it to some of the actual A-League stadiums, keeping in mind we're not looking at any permanent grounds at the moment, then maybe we push it back up to All-Star, depending on what other ones are there.
Well, I think that's fair, actually, because from a football point of view, you'd rank it above Adelaide Oval as a use when capacity is the number one criteria.
Yeah, maybe we come back and do a Socceroos stadium ranking, and it's the top, and it's the only one in the elite level. But we'll deal with that if and when we get to it. So the next one, again, another very unique stadium. I can tell you right now, Bran, I hate looking at this image, but this is Arena Manawatu. Apologies if I butchered any pronunciation. It is in Palmerston North. The Wellington Phoenix have previously used it. It's listed as having a capacity of 18,000. You can see from the image here, it's basically a racing track with the ground in the middle. There's an NRL set up on this at the moment. I think this one goes straight into the bin, to be completely honest with you, Bran. I think when we talk about suitability, it's a race ground. Like the nearest possible fans right now that are sitting in that stand are still probably, 60, 70, 80 metres away from the actual competition itself. There's no real atmosphere that's going to get built because there's no one sitting behind the goal. I think these are the sort of venues that we look at as being kind of the early part of the A-League, and obviously Wellington's trying to represent a whole country. I understand that's a challenge, but I do feel they would be better off in some sort of community Palmerston ground, getting 10,000 through the gate that are all just standing around the fence watching the game, rather than trying to make venues like this one effectively work. And I know there are logistical challenges, all that sort of stuff, but I think this is a really good representation of stuff that we don't really want to see anymore in the A-League. Yeah,
definitely falls into the bin category. Again, the one redeeming feature is it's only used every now and then, and as you said, as a regional stadium. So, and from a logistical point of view, it might well be the only stadium in Palmerston that can be used. So, definitely in the bin. But we will have that slight off the hook, I reckon.
Yeah, exactly. Like I can guarantee that this is one of those scenarios when Wellington reaches out to the Palmerston North Council, they say, "Oh yeah, we've got this great venue. It's our biggest one," and it is. But in reality, it's probably not the best suited to football-specific stadiums.
No, probably not.
Moving on to the next one, we head now down to Launceston in Tasmania. This is the Aurora Stadium, also known as the UTAS Stadium, and I think it's like Launceston International Sports Ground or something like that. There's about 15 different names for this one. It is an oval. It was used once or twice by Melbourne Victory when they were touring in and around Tasmania. The reason I've left this one in as a regional one is because I kind of look at this brand and think, potentially, once we eventually get to a discussion with Tasmanian expansion, you'd assume they're going to have most games in Hobart, but a few games in Launceston each year. Potentially, this is a venue that we may see come back up in future years within the A-League itself.
Yeah, it's a tough one to tell whether, for me, this one's flirting between needs improvement and in the bin. I've been to this stadium, not for an A-League game, but to watch the footy down there. And in terms of stadium quality, it's pretty nice. Atmosphere, though, I don't know how much you're going to generate. The Victory don't seem to generate a lot, but it's hard to tell if that's just because, they're a Victorian team playing interstate. Like, it's hard for fans in Tassie to get too pumped about a club that they might not really care about. I mean, Sean, we live in Melbourne. We don't care about the Victory at all. So how's anyone in Tassie going to get pumped for them, right?
Yeah, exactly right. I think I'm going to be generous. I think get in the bin is kind of like, that's the lowest of the low. We don't ever want to see that sort of stuff again. I think this just sneaks into the bottom of needs improvement because exactly like needs must. I would rather have a Tasmanian team playing in the A-League and playing in a shit stadium than not in the league at all. Like if we're talking about our prioritisation, if this is all Launceston's got to offer, and I know Launceston City viewers, if there are any watching, are probably sitting there saying we've got a great community level stadium that could be used for 8,000 people, 10,000 people. That to me is better suited than this. But, if, lawmakers, FFA people are watching and they want to have the capacity, then this is really what they're going to be looking at. But I think bottom of needs improvement is the high, like we're being generous, just putting it in that level for sure.
Yeah, and and the logistics are a big thing as well. So
yeah,
wouldn't
we'll take a hard line with every oval shaped stadium that we get, and as long as we're consistently shitting on ovals, then I think we'll be fine. Moving on to the next one, and this is a bit of a blast from the past. This is... Actually, no, it's not. Sorry, that's the next one. Campbelltown Stadium, but used by both, uniquely, Sydney FC and the Western Sydney Wanderers in Campbelltown in New South Wales. It has an okay rap amongst the fan groups. We'll talk a little bit further about some that don't have good raps from fan groups. But, again, it's not a football-specific stadium. It is set up for football configuration in the image that we're looking at. It's got stands either side, but no end stands, just a couple of rows of seating and then hills that are used for each game. What are your thoughts initially, just having a look at Campbelltown?
I don't think it's too bad. You said it's not football-specific, but it is, designed for rugby league, so it's rectangular. I think that's a big plus. I think the West Tigers rugby league team play there. So for me, I think it sort of trends towards the low end of decent, just because it is the right shape. It does have cover on both sides, so if you're going to have a little bit of shade or a little bit of escape from the rain. The no grandstands at the end, I don't think that's a huge detraction. I think that adds a little bit of personality to some of these stadiums. So I think it's low end of decent. What about you?
You've convinced me. Low end of decent is fine. I think there's a case to be made for needs improvement, but again, we're not talking about a permanent A-League ground. So it is a regional facility. Is MacArthur going to play here or somewhere near here in their first few years?
I'm pretty sure they are playing at Campbelltown.
Yeah, so we'll talk about... Maybe we'll give this one the benefit of the doubt. We're going to put it at the bottom end of decent. I'm a big advocate for if you're trying to create, a home stadium environment, you want to have your fans there behind a goal somewhere, so that they are supporting the team in that manner, which is kind of a more traditional way. And perhaps we're spoilt by we're comparing a lot of A-League multi-purpose venues to a lot of European institution venues. But I would like to see more in terms of at least one end behind the goal availability, so that they can kind of build that support, build that base. And I think that adds a lot to the atmosphere and viewing experience things that we're talking about relating to how we grade them. But I think you make good points. Decent is good. And I think its capacity at the moment, which is about 21,000, fully sold out, is perfect for a new club like MacArthur. Yeah.
And, as well, just because it is in the decent category doesn't mean that there isn't improvements that can be made. We just think that it, for the most part, it does trend into a decent stadium.
Yeah, for sure. All right, looking forward to the next one. This is Dairy Farmers Stadium. I did briefly kind of allude to it earlier. It is the former home of North Queensland Fury. Sadly, no longer within the A-League. It's still used by the Cowboys, I think, in the NRL. Again, I'm not 100% sure about these hills and these structures. It does have a stand, but then for whatever reason, that stand is 50 metres back from the actual edge of the pavilion or the edge of the playing area. So maybe this one's more specifically designed for an NRL experience. But, again, I just don't... There's something that, for me, when I look at the hills, I just think this takes away from it being, like a world-class league and a world-class standard, or, you wouldn't expect to see in FIFA any year a random hill behind a goal or in Football Manager or whatever else.
Again, mate, we're Victorians, so I don't know, but hills seem to be a big thing in New South Wales. A lot of rugby league stadiums.
Well, this one, before everyone fires in the comment section, we know this one's in far north Queensland. It's just we're calling out specifically before anyone starts getting really upset at you, Brand.
Yeah, sorry, beg your pardon. Maybe I should have said maybe it's a rugby league thing where hills behind the goals are popular. And one other thing as well, when we're talking about stadium quality, I'm pretty sure that the North Queensland Cowboys are about to move into a brand spanking new stadium next year, I'm pretty sure. So if the North Queensland Fury were to return in a expanded A-League, second division or anything like that, I don't think they would be playing here. They would have a pretty snazzy new stadium.
So do you think the fact that there is a new stadium on the way and that they've acknowledged that this isn't perfect, do you think this goes into in the bin category, or does it go into needs improvement category because they've built a new one?
I think it probably goes. Oh, I think it's bottom of needs improvement. It's.
Okay.
I
No,
don't know
think
if I
that's
would
fair.
put it in the bin, but I think it's about to be. I think it's about to be binned. You know,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I think the racetrack around Palmerston North is what gets it in the bin. I think that would be
Yeah.
harsh to throw that one in the bin alongside
Like
that
it's
company.
old and it's dated, but it is rectangular. It's I don't know.
All right, looking to the next one. This is again in New Zealand, Eden Park. It is a very, very famous rugby venue for both the All Blacks and in and around the NRL as well. It is based in Auckland. It was potentially used a couple of times as well by the New Zealand Knights in the very beginning of the A-League, but they had a more permanent home ground we'll get to in a moment. 50,000 capacity. I think if Wellington were going to have a huge game in Auckland, this is the largest stadium available to them. It does look nice. It is rectangular. I don't really know what to make of this one entirely, Bram. What do you think?
Well, I remember, I think the Phoenix played a game there last season, or it might have been this season. Last season prior to the lockdown, and they had quite a big crowd there, and it actually looked really good in terms of the atmosphere and the stadium quality. To be honest, with this one, I'm leaning towards decent. I mean, if we look at our criteria here, the stadium quality seems to be pretty good. Atmosphere, again, the big thing I think with atmosphere is when it's full. So I think that could either be a big plus or a big detractor, depending on how many fans they actually had at the games. But TV experience is good. So I think for most of that, it's got a thumbs up. So I think it trends towards decent.
Whereabouts do you think it sits in the decent tier? In between, maybe? We've got in there Homebush, Allianz,
yep.
And then we also had Campbelltown Stadium, the new home of MacArthur.
I reckon this is probably second. I reckon it'd be New Zealand's equivalent of Stadium Australia.
Yeah, I think that's a fair shout. I think initially looking at them, I think that's a good sitting post for it. And if we ever do see expansion in the A-League and a team return to Auckland, e.g. Auckland City, if any fans are listening, Eden Park would probably be their elite level ground, and then they'll probably have something closer to a community stadium, which we will get to in a moment. Staying in New Zealand though, we jump forward to Forsyth Bar Stadium, and this is my sneaky favourite because it is an indoor stadium. You mentioned earlier before we started recording, it's used by the Crusaders in the rugby?
Not the Crusaders, Highlanders.
The Highlanders. All right, I forgot which movie it might be from.
I'm going to Google it. The Highlanders. Yeah, it's used by the Highlanders, I'm pretty sure, and that's why it's indoor to protect from the wind and the rain. But it looks pretty darn cool. I mean, like when you're talking about fun stadium designs, it's sick. It looks cool.
Yeah, I think, again, I don't expect to see any A-League sides bobbing up anytime soon in Dunedin. And I think one of the other things, we'll probably talk about this a little bit further once we get into a bit of a deep dive with the current A-League stadiums. Now that we're making that transition to more of a winter football season rather than the summer-winter season, it's probably not going to be in that elite tier, but I just really like it. I just really like the concept of having an indoor stadium. I like that, Dunedin's trying to protect from the wind and the rain and the snow and whatever else. I think it goes in the decent category, but I think it would be perhaps unfair on the other stadiums that we've listed in decent to, put it above them. I think it sits down towards the base of decent just by the sheer novelty of having an indoor stadium within the A-League.
Well, and in terms of quality, it hosted games during the Rugby World Cup when New Zealand hosted it. So it is right up there, but I think it's only a regional stadium. So I think it's a little bit unfair to sort of say that it's, better than other stadiums that are going to go in this category when it's only used every now and then. It's not an everyday or a week-to-week stadium.
We aligned on bottom of decent?
Yeah. I think we might have to... And then at the end, we might have to have a recap and a quick tweak to make sure it looks good. But I think it firmly sits in that decent category.
Yeah, definitely. We're now heading to a currently in use stadium based down in Geelong, south-western suburbs of Melbourne. It is the GMHBA Stadium, as it's currently known, also known as Kardinia Park. It's been used previously in other years by Melbourne Victory when they were travelling down to Geelong trying to capture some of that fan base, and has been for the last season or two used by Western United. Probably a caveat here, and I'm going to try not to be cynical, and I'm going to try and stay impartial all the time. This may be an A-League stadium longer than it was ever intended, because Western United Stadium being built has not even, I think, begun planning stages. So we may be seeing this stadium in and around the A-League a little bit longer than perhaps we've put it in this list.
Yeah, I think this one, for me, it goes in the bin, because we've seen that with Western United playing some of their games there towards the start of the season, they tried to move away from it. They didn't like it. You know, they were there and they're like, you know, we can't get crowds. It's in terms of suitability, it's super low. In terms of TV experience, it'd be low. I mean, the stadium quality's there, and atmosphere, it's no good. So Western United, they actively tried to move games away from there. Whether they went to Ballarat and they were talking about Knight Stadium in Sunshine. So for me, it's in the bin. The only thing that would save it would be, I don't know, yeah, like maybe playing in Geelong to try to attract regional fans. But even then, I'm not buying it.
Well, that's the tough thing as well. I can't blame anyone in Geelong for not wanting to support Western United, because why would you go and support a club for 2 years that's going to leave you? And it's going to leave you for, you know, a place an hour away, which doesn't have the greatest access in terms of driving or public transport anyway. I think trying to capture hearts and minds in Geelong is perhaps... I'm sure there's a smart person at Western United that thought about this ahead of time, but I don't know what incentive there is for anyone in Geelong to support that side. It is actually easier via public transport to get to a Melbourne Victory game or a Melbourne City game if you're travelling by train or something like that. So, you've sold me on it. It's in the bin. It goes above Palmerston North because Palmerston North is trash, but definitely not one that we want to see in the A-League in the future. And hopefully they do figure out a way. Like you mentioned briefly, Knights Stadium, Summer Street. I think it would be good to see more boutique stadiums like that for a club like Western United. I think that's going to help their integration into the local footballing community, get some of these State League fans or NPL fans to attend their games. And hopefully if they enjoy the experience, they continue supporting the club from there. I think that's a much better path forward for them than trying to shoehorn themselves into an existing AFL ground or cricket ground or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Definitely. So, like, as a repeated, not a repeated, but as a main stadium, like for Western United, definitely in the bin. Yeah. As an occasional, maybe, you know, the Victory play in Geelong once or twice a year, maybe we'd give it a pass, but no, in the bin.
And for their crowds as well, I think if they're getting 3,000 or 4,000, they don't go and use North Geelong Warriors ground. Go and use like any of the Geelong teams' local grounds if you're only going to get 4,000. I don't think it's going to cause that big an issue or that big a concern. Switching back to New Zealand again, they do come up quite a bit in this tier of grounds that we're looking at. This is North Harbour Stadium. This was the original stadium of the New Zealand Knights, which didn't last incredibly long in the A-League. I've deliberately gone and got this photo because a lot of the marketing photos on their website just show you the stand and it makes it look magnificent. It's not that great. Again, the hills make an appearance. There is one covered stand. I think, and I mentioned it briefly earlier, as we're moving into kind of a more winter A-League, stadiums like this that don't offer that much shelter protection don't provide the highest level of stadium quality for a winter sport. But Fox Sports would probably love it. They'd film from this side. They'd look at just that side when it's raining or winter or whatever else and see a half-full stadium. But where's your immediate gut feeling on North Harbour Stadium?
For me, it's I reckon it's needs improvement towards the low tier. I know that the New Zealand ABL, Australian Baseball League team play there, so
they love it. So all of the stuff on the website for this particular stadium is that it's one of the highest rated baseball stadiums in New Zealand. So if it's a baseball ground, fantastic, happy for them, hope that all works out really well. But as far as football grounds are concerned, needs improvement. I think that's perfect.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and again, you wouldn't want this to be the permanent home. And multi-purpose stadiums, I don't know, they're always tricky. They're designed to be good for multiple sports, and they end up being, jack of all trades, master of none, because they try to cater to so many, then sort of not really any good for either. I mean, that one grandstand looks pretty sweet, and that's better than some other stadiums' grandstands for sure. But as a venue as a whole, I don't think it's, I don't know. I can't imagine putting it in the decent category.
We'll talk about this in the next few weeks when we talk further about different expansion sides. But potentially, if an Auckland side came back into the competition, I could see a combination of North Harbour Stadium and Eden Park working. As Eden Park is kind of the elite level ground for big fixtures, whatever else. But, like when they get Perth Glory away, distance derby, and there's 4,000 people rocking up, maybe this is the sort of stadium that's available to them. I don't know enough about Auckland's football scene to say there are that many community stadiums out there. I would think Auckland City itself probably has a pretty decent stadium set up and can probably cater to a few thousand people. So I don't know why this would sit still within that discussion. But we'll talk about that further in a future episode, I have no doubt. Jumping back across the ditch into Australia, we are heading to North Sydney Stadium. A very difficult stadium to get photos of, as it turns out, as you can tell by the giant watermark that's appearing across this image. Shout out to whoever sydneyimages.com.au is. Please don't sue us. The Central Coast Mariners have used this a couple of times. It can seat 20,000. It is mainly a cricket ground. You can see the giant test wicket just over there on that right-hand side. I don't know if you remember this, Brand. This was rated as possibly the worst ever A-League surface to play a competitive fixture on. There are a variety of teams that complained about the surface itself, the injury risk, a whole bunch of different stuff that came with it, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the Mariners haven't really used it again. I would probably make a case for this being our next get in the bin candidate.
I reckon it's an awkward shape. It just it's low at the end of, in terms of if we're ranking oval stadiums, which are never going to be elite. It's at the very, very low end of oval. If GMHBA got put in the bin, then this gets put in the bin.
I think that's fair. We throw it down in the trash with the rest of them. May North Sydney Oval never be used again for A-League fixtures. Now we go across to a very big, very spectacular looking stadium. It's the Optus Stadium, just opened in Perth last year. It was actually in amongst its first uses, hosted both Leeds United and Manchester United in a tour of Western Australia. Can seat 65,000 in total. It's hosted Perth just a couple of times for those big marquee fixtures. I don't think, and I could be corrected wrong, if I am wrong, let me know in the comment section below, that it's been used in a regular season A-League fixture. I think there were some scheduled, but due to COVID and a variety of different restrictions in and out states and moving to a hub model, it never actually got used in the A-League. It is spectacular looking, but again, I think it's a giant oval. I think we put this one right at the very top of needs improvement, if you were to ask me, Bran.
I would almost rank it. I would almost rank it as decent, simply because it's the Perth equivalent of Adelaide Oval. So
okay. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because I think if we've got Adelaide Oval as decent as a one-off, grand final venue, I think.
Well, actually, Adelaide Oval we did put at the top of needs improvement, but we did say that we'd come back and review it.
There we go. All right, well, there we go. Then I reckon top of needs improvement. Wherever Adelaide Oval sits, I reckon this sits right alongside it.
So I think you'll see, as this starts to take shape, we've got some, in our needs improvement bracket, it's a variety of very good oval stadiums, which is, I think, we're kind of getting into a rhythm now where if it's an oval shape, it's not really what we want to see in the A-League as far as, atmosphere, viewing, support, whatever else, getting involved with the regional community. I would rather see Perth either play at NIB, which is a good stadium, and expand that further, or if they've got smaller fixtures, go and try and find some community club like Perth Soccer Club to host and get involved with the local community that way. So again, spectacular, fantastic stadium. It is state of the art. It is brand new, but it's just not A-League specific, and I think that's what puts it in the needs improvement category.
And there's always something weird about teams like Adelaide United or Perth Glory having to play these big fixtures at a stadium that isn't their home stadium. Like, it's in the same city, but it's, I don't know, it just doesn't have that same attachment, that same feeling, the same level of connection. So it's sort of like it's never gonna be. It'd be like the Victory playing at the G. It would just be wrong. Like, it just wouldn't fit.
Yeah, and it's purely, and I'm not begrudging this. This isn't a criticism, because if I was running a club, it's exactly what I'd do. It's purely to try and make more revenue through ticket sales. That's all it is, and that's the scenario that the A-League is unfortunately in. It would be great if we could fill out 80,000, specific stadiums for A-League fixtures, but unfortunately, that's not where we're at. But hopefully, in the future, we'll get there eventually. But for the moment, Optus, as beautiful as you look, you head down into the needs improvement category. Another blast from the past is the next one up. It is Robina Stadium on the Gold Coast, home to Gold Coast United before they folded. Now, full disclosure, I think when we look at this one, Bran, we're not going to look at the way Clive Palmer ran it, where he only opens up one stand and only 3,000 people can get in because he's a billionaire and an arsehole. We are going to imagine this is a full Robina Stadium and, really getting the Gold Coast back to participation in an international league. It can seat 27,000 people, which I think is kind of the sweet spot between what is needed and what our expansion capacity would be. what are your immediate thoughts on football on the Gold Coast?
Well, I'm glad that you had the caveat that, we're not going to talk about the way that Clive Palmer had it, but what we can talk about is sort of looking at it in the realms of the home of a future, the home of a future regular A-League side, because Gold Coast United in a national second tier and things like that have put their hand up and said that they want back in. So this could be the home of an A-League team sooner than we think. So in terms of that, in my opinion, I reckon it's in the decent category. I mean, it's probably a little bit big for what Gold Coast United, when we saw when they were in the league previously, I don't think they ever would need to have all four stands open. I can't remember as many Gold Coast United games where they had a large crowd. But in terms of suitability, it's there. The stadium quality looks pretty good. You got fully enclosed roofs over the whole thing. TV experience, if it's not run by Clive Palmer and he only has one stand open, and then that one stand open is is on the opposite side to the camera anyway. For me, it's in decent. It's a decent stadium.
Are you thinking roughly in between Allianz and Campbelltown, or roughly around that sort of spot?
I'd go below Allianz, above Campbelltown, because
Perfect.
I think it's a better stadium than Campbelltown.
Yeah, it is a nice stadium, but like this is kind of like if you ever play Football Manager and you turn on the editor and you give yourself a 30,000 seat stadium when you've only got 100 fans. That's kind of the scenario that you're in. It's a bit big for what they need, like you said, but I think, as far as football-specific stadiums, it's rectangular. If it was full, the atmosphere would be fantastic. I think we're putting it in the right category with decent.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, speaking of going from one decent stadium to one that is not at all decent and had probably one of the worst fan responses in recent years, it is Spotless Stadium, also known as the Sydney Showgrounds. Western Sydney Wanderers had to use this stadium a couple of seasons ago as they were building a brand new one, which we'll get to further in a moment. It has just horrific reviews. I think they had glass on it at certain points. We're not really talking about playing surfaces, but I think they found glass on the playing surface during a game. Fans hated it. Everyone really had poor experiences at Spotless.
Yeah, I think the glass and the plastic, I think that came down to stadium management. I think they had like a concert or a festival
the
there.
Night before, and it was something weird. It was like Taylor Swift or something like that, and there was all shards of whatever on there.
Broken glassware or beerware or whatever. For me, it's in the bin. It's in the bin. The one redeeming feature was it was never meant to be a permanent home of Western Sydney, and all the fans knew it, all the around the league knew it. So for me, that's the one redeeming feature, that they're not going to go back there, but they never should. So in the bin for me.
And we'll get to it in a minute, but they never have to, which is always fantastic to talk about as well. But yeah, in the bin with Spotless Stadium. Shout out to any Western Sydney fans that are now deleting whatever angry comments they were just writing in the section below. The last one of this kind of first tier of the, sort of ad hoc, former or unique stadiums that we're looking at, Subiaco Oval. It was the previous AFL ground in Perth prior to the use of Perth Oval, which we spoke about earlier. Really, it's probably falls into a very similar category. I can't see football ever returning to Subiaco Oval. There are some great images from I think 1994, 1995 prior to the start of the A-League. But really, we're trying to judge this explicitly on its A-League suitability. And I think this might be another one to drop in the bin. Bran, what do you think?
Well, I think the decision's been made for us, mate, because they're demolishing it. So it's someone else has binned it for us. I'm pretty sure it's actually physically knocked down. I don't think it's around anymore. So even if it hadn't been knocked down, we would have probably supported it being knocked down anyway. Put it in the bin.
Straight in the bin. I think the easy sells are the bin sells. The tough ones are trying to place the ones that you actually kind of enjoy a little bit. Now, that does close off. I know we said at the start we were going to do that as a quick fire round, but we just can't help ourselves when it comes to talking about football. We've gone a little bit over, which is absolutely fine. We are now switching, and we're going to have a look at current stadiums in use within the A-League. There's a couple of sides that have a few stadiums available, again, due to capacity issues, whatever else. But we start off with one that's probably near and dear to both of our heart, Bran, which is AAMI Park, also known as Melbourne Rectangular Stadium. Do you want to give me... First, I think we're probably way too biased in this one, and we'll call that out early before people start putting angry comments down below. But as far as, the categories that we're looking at, what are your thoughts on Melbourne Rectangular as a whole?
I think it's top tier. I'm going to be honest. I think it's top tier. we've been to a whole bunch of games there. You know, no obstructed views. It's quality. The atmosphere is buzzing. It's definitely suitable. The TV experience is great. I think, you know, again, you're probably a little bit further away from the sidelines than you would like. You know, when I would love to be like, you know, how you watch English football and the grandstands and like 2 meters from the pitch.
Yeah, and the other thing with the English stadiums that we don't see here, it's the angle of the like seating as well. Like you really, a row to a row is much higher. It's much higher an angle in terms of the overall thing.
So I think it's top tier. I will say, however, though, I think from a victory point of view, for the victory, I think it's top tier. For Melbourne City, however, I would think it is only decent. You know, I'm a Melbourne City fan. You're a Melbourne City fan. I have never been to a game at Amy Park other than a derby where the top level's been open. So it's a great stadium to go watch a game of football in. But for Melbourne City, it's too big. So I think Melbourne City would be far better off at a smaller 15, 18,000 seat stadium. But for the victory, I think it's pretty much perfect.
Yeah, I think if Melbourne City, and this is another discussion for probably another list, but if Melbourne City finds another Aaron Moy and can sell him for £20 million, maybe the City Football Group does get us that 10,000 seat boutique stadium somewhere in and around Melbourne. I do think this is all-star, but if I'm going to put my devil's advocate hat on, I do think there are games that get moved to another stadium that we'll talk about in a minute, where I would like to see Amy have some sort of either fluctuating capacity, the ability to expand stands to hit 50,000, and potentially on the other end of it, also, have the ability to maybe bring, some of the ends a little bit forward. The distance needed between an A-League goal and, the Melbourne Storm goals and the back area for where they shoot in NRL games is a little bit different. I do think this is all-star tier, but I do think it's also one that we're potentially looking at in the next few years as the league hopefully continues to grow, as we talk about record, registration and member numbers and all that sort of stuff. Maybe we are getting towards the capacity. I think Melbourne Victory had 27,000 members last season, and it's sitting at 30,000 as of peak capacity. So even if just their members get to the club and get to every game, which we know they don't, they do get pretty close to selling out that ground. It does for the 3 Melbourne derbies every year, sell out. The Christmas derby is fantastic. There was an FFA Cup final a couple of seasons ago, you might remember, Brand, that sold out, and it was a phenomenal atmosphere. Yep. I do think this goes in All-Star, but potentially I think it's maybe towards the bottom end of the All-Star ones.
It can be in All-Star. It's in All-Star, but it's by no means perfect. You mentioned expansion. I believe they built the foundations. That was the whole part of the pitch. It's like, it can be expanded to 50,000, but then they built this giant weird bubble roof over the outside, which now means it can't be expanded without major construction because you have to pretty much take the roof off the whole thing.
Yeah,
so
I think the original plan and application for this space was a 50,000 seat stadium, and then other grounds, be it some that we'll talk about, like, Docklands and MCG and whatever else, question the need to have a 50,000 seat stadium because they know that they'll lose the revenue. MCG is only interested if an international side or an international touring team like a Real Madrid, Roma, whoever else has been here in the last few years is coming. There will never be an A-League game at the MCG, no matter what. But, really it's just one of those things where this is probably more limited by the politics in and around Melbourne and Melbourne sport than the actual suitability of the ground. On its day, full to the brim, it is amongst the best, if not the best in the league. It's just really about the future of it that I think we're kind of talking about from a negative perspective. But yeah, the first All-Star one makes the list, which I think is great. And if anyone disagrees, by all means, hit me up on Twitter or throw it in the comment section below. So the next one we head up to the Central Coast and Gosford itself. Now, Brand, this is a stadium that's very near and dear to my heart. I enjoy it quite a bit. I think it is one of the most picturesque stadiums in world football. Having said that, we have to put our journalist hats back on. We have to look at some of the flaws as well and the rules that we've set out for ourselves. What are your immediate thoughts and opinions on Central Coast Stadium?
Well, it's similar to yours. I love it as well. I think it's an interesting stadium because it's got the view of the water, the giant sauce bottles. So I think from that point of view, a lot of people love it, whereas, that sort of might change their opinion. You might rank it higher because you like it as opposed to how good it actually is. For me, it fits in the decent category. I think it's a pretty good size. The 2 main grandstands on either end are pretty good as well. A grandstand behind one of the goals, so I think it's sort of mid-level decent. How about you?
So this is perhaps as it is right now. If we were still playing the A-League in summer, I would say fantastic stadium. Great. That's exactly what you would want and need out of a boutique stadium in that part of the world. And before I go into this, any Central Coast fans, I understand that this is not a huge in-demand stadium for the region. It's the best that they have and is on offer. I think the capacity is great for Central Coast. It's exactly what we need it to be. Stadium quality is fine. I think now we make the transition to winter, though, it probably needs more roof seating. Otherwise, if you've got... The downside is one of the ends pushes out into the harbour, which you guys can see there on the right-hand side of the image. Once you get into winter and everyone wants to be sitting under cover, you're going to have effectively 2 empty ends, which doesn't do much for the atmosphere and doesn't do much for the TV experience in terms of, you know, getting fans in the stadium and like loud, vibrant crowds, singing, chanting, whatever else. So I think this does go in decent, and I think it's towards the top end of decent. But I do think that potentially as a winter sports ground, there are improvements that will need to be made to try and maximise crowds, get more people in there and build up the atmosphere, which might mean that maybe they do leave that other end still open and that becomes like their signature palm tree end. But, you know, maybe they do need more coverage on that on that near side for the fans so that they can be in cover and they can be there supporting the team, because we want football to be thriving in Central Coast as much as possible.
I agree.
Easy. All right. We're very agreeable in this one. We haven't had to argue about anything. Whereabouts do you think for placement? Maybe maybe just behind Homebush?
Well, I think Homebush and Eden Park have to go side by side. I don't think I don't. What's it ranked just above there?
Allianz.
I reckon just behind Allianz. I think Allianz, in terms of quality, I think it is a better stadium.
Okay. I think it actually says similarities with the one it's alongside now, which is Robina Stadium on the Gold Coast. I think they're similar in terms of their wants and needs. But, don't...
And it looks like it's ahead of Campbelltown as well.
Yeah. And Campbelltown's kind of the unknown.
I would agree with.
Yeah, Campbelltown's a little bit unknown because, you know, like we haven't seen that much of it other than teams that aren't going to be based in that area. Campbelltown might be absolutely jam-packed now that MacArthur has joined the league and they have their own local side to support. That'll be interesting to see if we revisit this list in, 12 months' time, 2 years' time, whatever else. Looking forward again, we jump to not my favourite, and I immediately kind of groaned and my inside sunk as soon as I saw it. Marvel Stadium, also known as the Etihad Stadium, also known as Dockland Stadium, here in Melbourne. It is very similar to some of the other grounds we've discussed, kind of the large bulk stadium used if Melbourne Victory has a large game that they want to get 50,000 people in the stadium for. This is where they go. We've seen derbies at it, Bran. There's been A-League Grand Finals at it. It actually has, when you think about it, a really good A-League history in terms of the games that have been played there. But as far as the categories that we've set out, like the atmosphere, the suitability, experience, all that sort of stuff, what are your thoughts, feelings on Marvel?
I'm tossing up whether this needs to be put in the bin or whether it's in the needs improvement category. I mean, as you mentioned, there's been plenty of big A-League moments there. The Socceroos have played there as well. It's tough because, the seats on the grandstands on the side, they can move them in to make it closer. Even when they do that, though, it's still not great, and they don't do that often enough. I think with the whole AFL situation, they found out that when they move the seats in, it destroys the grass. So they would never do it in footy season because it would destroy the turf. So from that point of view, the benefits of being able to move the stands in almost become null and void. So I think it's low end of needs improvement. I think the Victory try to avoid playing there as much as they can. They've got contractual obligations to play there. I think outside of that, though, they would much prefer to play at Amy Park.
So back in reference for people that aren't aware, this stadium was previously independently owned and is now owned by the AFL, who have a horrific record in their treatment of football. I would say an independently owned Dockland Stadium is at the bottom end of needs improvement. I would say an AFL-owned Dockland Stadium is in the bin.
Yeah, it's tough. If it's in the bin, I think it's
top. In the bin. Okay, let's go with that. And of course, we reserve the right to change our mind at any point and move it back up to needs improvement. So
I've already changed my mind about 50 times on all of the stadiums, but I think it's sort of like I think it fits into the category of Melbourne's equivalent of Adelaide Oval and Perth Stadium, where it's like, a bigger capacity stadium, but I think it's worse than both of them.
No, I think you're right. I think we've set a precedent now about how we've set some of these grounds up in terms of, what they are and what their function is in the league. And I think, it's a tough one. Let's put it in the bin, but let's at the end go back through our list and see how we feel about a couple of them, having discussed all of the grounds.
Yeah, great.
All right, jumping forward, we now head to a very unique little stadium. I actually don't mind this one for a couple of reasons I'll get into in a moment. It is Dolphin Stadium, which has been more frequently used by Brisbane Roar of late. They are, I think, also using a similar area now as far as their training facilities are concerned. This has hosted FFA Cup ties, including Melbourne City Brand. You might remember a game we played there a few years ago, as well as a couple of fixtures here and there for regional sides. Looking at it immediately, you can kind of see some of the good things and bad things about it. What are your immediately thoughts and opinions on Dolphin Stadium?
Well, I think it's good and it's bad. I think it fits into the needs improvement and the decent category, if that makes sense. It's sort of in between both, where it's decent in terms of it's the right shape. It is far better suited than another stadium that we'll get to later on for Brisbane Roar, I think. Another one, like when we talk about quality and needs improvement, they are discussing about redeveloping the stadium. It's just, I think a lot of the discussion has sort of revolved around how they're going to redevelop it. Like, is it going to be a base, like a training base for someone like the Queensland Reds, the rugby union team, where they sort of base themselves there rather than like, a stadium where you have a team based out of there, where they're playing all of their home games there, like Brisbane Roar every week. So I think it's a little bit up in the air where they don't know exactly how they're going to use it. Does that make sense? Do you think?
Look, I think this is the unlucky loser that we have to put just by looking even at the quality of the image, the fact it's only got 2 grandstands either side. This right-hand side, I think, is like an RSL or a serviceman's club or something like that. Or like, Dolphins club, whatever else. It's a balcony and a big building. No one can stand in front of it. There is kind of a veranda type thing out the front, a balcony, which would be great if you could let 25 people onto a balcony, but you can't. I think this is a step in the right direction massively, and I think I know the stadium that you're going to talk about in a moment relating to Brisbane Roar, but I think this is one that could be fantastic and could be up towards, like decent tier, potentially in the future, even all-star tier. But I think it needs quite a bit of redevelopment in terms of the overall stadium quality. As we look at it now, it is quite old. The atmosphere, because it is open-ended, you're not going to capture that much sound, that much colour, that much experience. It's great that it's rectangular. The TV experience is average. It's all ground level camera work, so it's not the best viewing experience. I think we put this at the top of needs improvement, but it's with that little asterisk next to it saying that we know the improvements are potentially coming.
Well, and I just did a quick Google, and apparently just recently they declared that the stadium is NRL ready. So they've recently opened the northern grandstand of Dolphin Stadium, which cost $6.5 million. So it looks like they are doing those redevelopments along the way. So again, we're not in Brisbane, so maybe all those Brisbane people, they might know, or they probably will know a lot more about this stadium than us. So I think it's top of needs improvement because I think it is being improved, but I think it's also decent. I think when the Raw played there, they had to put in semi-permanent temporary grandstands and a few other things. So needs improvement, but they're improving it. So I think that will take it to decent.
Yeah, I think, look, top of needs improvement was my immediate thought, not knowing what you've just listed with the new stand opening up. I think this is the most unlucky one. I think it probably, in reality, is it.
Talking about it for ages.
Yeah, I think it's probably could be a very strong case could be made for it being towards the bottom of decent. But when we look at the other stadiums that we've put in the decent category, they are effectively closer to complete than I think Dolphins is at the moment.
Oh, yeah. Like Dolphins has potential, but we can't necessarily market.
We can't grade on potential. Our integrity would go out the window, and it's only 2 videos on the channel.
2 shows in, far out.
All right, jumping forward to another one which is potentially not going to rank that highly. This is Mars Stadium. Now, we give Mars Stadium a little bit of a pass. It is in a regional area. It is Ballarat. We mentioned earlier when talking about Cardinia Park or GM HBA in Geelong that Western United are looking to move to more football-specific stadiums that are easier for them to manage given their current fan base. And this is actually a photo from a Western United game where they did sell quite a few tickets. How much leeway do we give this one for being based in a regional area that doesn't necessarily have football-specific stadia available?
I think we give it more leeway. And again, I think, when you talk about the suitability of regional stadiums, a lot of it depends on what's the dominant sport in that area. Like, we're talking about the regional stadiums in New Zealand and how almost all of them are suitable for A-League games, and that's because rugby's the dominant sport over there. So it's designed to feature rectangular stadiums. Even in New South Wales and Queensland, you've got more of those other stadiums are already that rectangular shape. So I think being in Victoria, obviously it's designed for footy. I think we give it a bit more of a pass there. From the reviews that I read when Western United played there, fans preferred it much more to GMHBA, so perhaps that's just from an atmosphere point of view, it gets higher ranking than Geelong did, definitely for that. So I think for me, it's in the needs improvement. And again, we've said it the whole way through that we know with some of these stadiums they are used for regional. As regional hubs to, sort of grow the club and attract fans that way. So they're never going to be perfect. You just sort of have to take what you can get. So for me, it's in the needs improvement as a regional stadium. If it was a permanent home or if a team was going to be based there long term, I'd put it in the bin. But considering that it's a every now and then stadium, needs improvement for me.
Yeah, I think it's actually probably very similar to what we just spoke about with Dolphin Stadium. Like it's got potential, and I think there are some clubs in Ballarat, but they are very much community clubs, even though they do play at a high level. And being in a small regional area, it is really tough to get that investment to get football-specific stadia and things like that. I would like to see if Western United have a game that they know they're going to get a small crowd to, like a Wellington, like a Perth, whatever else, them take it to a regional stadium for an existing club. Like Ballarat that plays in the NPL, a few of the other clubs in and around the state leagues as well. But I think we put this one kind of in that needs improvement category, and you can see needs improvement is kind of now split between oval stadiums down towards the bottom, and then stadiums that potentially could be something if they get the right redevelopment, and I think this kind of sits in that category.
Yeah. Well, the only thing for that is I don't know if they ever would redevelop this for rectangular sports, like the North Ballarat Football Club play there. So I don't know. Yeah. It'll be interesting, but I can't see this being a permanent home for any A-League team.
No, neither do I. But I think redevelopment for this is probably closer than Western United's actual stadium that they promised everyone when they got the license being built anytime soon. So yeah, we'll throw it in needs improvement. We might look at the placement of it, where it sits in that group as we do our review at the end. Looking forward to one of the most popular stadiums in the league. Adelaide United fans have just lit up looking down at Coopers Stadium. This is potentially, and we're doing another video on it in future, relating to great away trips. The away area in Coopers Stadium is fantastic. The home area in Coopers Stadium is fantastic. If I'm putting on my devil's advocate hat here, Bran, and trying to point out flaws with it, we are moving to a winter season. Is there enough stadium and stand coverage for those fans? And then the other one, the thing that I think has been spoken about a variety of times throughout Adelaide's history, is the capacity. How much room do they have to grow to kind of start making the most of their popularity within Adelaide itself? What are some of your thoughts, feelings on Coopers, or Hindmarsh as it's previously known?
Well, echoing a lot of what you said, you said with no covering there that it's not going to be good for winter sports. We've already seen that it's not good for the A-League in summer. Like, what was it last season over December, Jan? There was a couple of 38, 40-degree days in Adelaide, and they were playing games there, and there's no shade. So for me, it definitely sits in the decent category. I think
the
suitability is great.
Yeah, I think this is actually an all-star stadium as far as the league's concerned.
You reckon?
Yeah, because I think what I was trying to put forward is that it's not going to be suitable for winter, but then you've come back and said it's not suitable for summer either. That either makes it trash and we have to put it down, or we're trying to be nitpicky to try and drive something down. I think as far as, imagine it's full imagine the weather's not a factor. It's, I think, an all-star stadium within the league itself.
Am I imagining that I haven't road tripped to this stadium twice to watch my team lose 4-0 in an FA Cup final and lose in extra time in an elimination final, or am I factoring that in as well?
No, we are impartial journalists at the reserve team. We don't support any clubs. We just support football in general.
Yeah. All right. If you want to put it, I reckon it's either low all-star or it's top of decent.
I think low all-star. I think that's fair.
In. Yep. One of the other things that I love about it is that there's a church inside the stadium. That's so Adelaide. That's great.
City of churches, they have to work. They're contractually obligated to put a church in every new building within the city of Adelaide. Don't Google that. I'm pretty sure. Let's just go with it.
Yeah, but as you said, it is a great way. A great place to watch a game of football, and the atmosphere is right up there with best in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the one that I would say, what do you want a new stadium in Adelaide? And you were going to ask Adelaide fans. They would say no. They just want further development at Coopers. And I think that goes a long way to kind of the way it's set up and what they're building in the area. Yeah. So, Adelaide fans, hope you're happy. We jump now across to Netstrata Jubilee Stadium, based in Newcastle. Now, I have never actually been to this stadium before. Is it based in Newcastle? No, I apologise. It's not. No, I'm getting McDonald Jones and Netstrata Jubilee mixed up. This is Sydney FC's home ground in Kogarah, which you can see the photo now was from one of their most recent fixtures. You can see fans pouring into the stadium. Definitely a demand in the area. But again, it is an oval stadium. We have been pretty critical of them in the past. There are no specific areas really for, like the Cove itself. I think they set up over on this hill. I don't really know what to make of this one, but I do know it is incredibly popular amongst the Sydney FC fans.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tricky, because as you said, when you look at that photo, you see that oval shape, and behind the goals, it's just so telling because that's where most of the active areas are based anyway. And so you just, from a TV viewing experience, you just miss out on that, on seeing that sort of stuff. It does have huge rave reviews. It's super popular. So for me, I'm thinking it's decent.
Let me put this to you another way. Would you rather watch a game at Dolphin Stadium or would you rather watch a game at Kogarah?
Probably Dolphin, but let me counter your question, which is, would you rather watch a game at Allianz or at Jubilee?
Probably Allianz because it's rectangular.
Oh, okay. I was just sort of thinking, I think that the atmosphere on this one would bump it up a little bit, sort of similar to Adelaide.
This is where I disagree. If it doesn't have a roof off it for sound to echo off, it's just open air and that sound goes nowhere in particular. So I find these open air sort of stadiums, ovals, whatever else, they're things that everyone loves about football and things that we want to see for the A-League itself. We don't get that in this environment, which is effectively a cricket oval. You should be able to hear songs, chants, whatever else clearly, but unless you're at a huge stadium at a cricket game, you can't. If you're at kind of a regional small tier stadium like this one for a cricket match, you can't hear any of that sort of stuff. And I think, having not been here as well, I think this stadium perhaps loses something by only having the one stand. I don't think you could create imagine if you're, leading a fan base, trying to organise a terrace, whatever else, you're trying to organise chants and echoes and all that sort of stuff across the stadium. I don't know how much atmosphere you could actually build in this current open air environment. But having said that, we have given a pass to other grounds for future developments. Maybe that's just something they need. Maybe they just need one of the ends closed off with a stand to try and really make the most of creating an intimidating atmosphere.
So where are you going to rank this one?
I think the topper needs improvement, but I could be swayed towards the bottom of decent, in and around kind of Campbelltown.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think it is tough because we haven't been there. I'm thinking tough. Tricky.
You know what? Because we haven't been there, let's be fair. Let's give it a little bit of a boost and stay positive with it. Let's put it in the decent category, and Sydney FC fans can let us know in the comment section below exactly what they like about Kogarah.
The fans love it.
Yeah, true. That's true. We do have to take fan accounts into it. And potentially, who knows, mate, if this YouTube channel takes off and we start raking in that Patreon money, you and I can get ourselves some tickets to the next Melbourne City away game.
It.
All right, let's focus on the positive. Let's put it in needs improvement. We're going to put it just alongside Campbelltown because we're not looking to cause any fights between Sydney FC and Macarthur fans. But if you do have feedback on any of these stadiums and where we've placed them, by all means, let us know down in the comment section below. Jumping forward now, and I won't mess this one up because it's very easy to figure out which stadium it is just looking at the seat pattern, is Suncorp Stadium, the current home of Brisbane Roar. Love it or hate it, Suncorp Stadium has consistently supported the A-League and Brisbane Roar. They've always given them a home. The big criticism, and I'm sure you'll go into it a little bit further in a moment, Bran, is that it's too big. This is a tough one because we either do what we've done for a couple of the other ones and imagine it full and imagine it for grand finals where it is a big, large, rectangular stadium. It's got good visibility, good access, good quality. Or do we imagine what it is the other 20 rounds of the season where it is 5,000 people effectively in a 50,000 seat stadium and it is effectively just, like sitting in a library some weeks. What are your immediate thoughts and reflections on Suncorp as a whole?
Well, for me, it's sort of, we have to do both. I think it goes into the same category as Etihad Stadium, to be honest, in terms of it's either sort of partly in the bin or needs improvement. I think as a regular home of the Brisbane Roar, it's terrible. It's so cavernous. It's so big. So like the stadium quality is there, but the atmosphere.
Here's what I'll come back with, right? We put Homebush in decent, imagining it full. Do we have to? I think given the scale of the stadium, the fact that it is rectangular, I think we're probably having more of a discussion on whether it sits in decent or needs improvement. I see the needs improvement portion, but if we're the same way that we looked at Homebush and said, imagine this is full and that Sydney's packed it out with 80,000 people, it's a decent stadium. The same thing for Brisbane.
But I don't know how often Sydney FC play regular season games there. I don't think they ever do. Whereas, the Brisbane Roar play here week in, week out, and they get crowds of 10,000 at a 55,000 seat stadium. So from a TV...
That is fair. That's a fair comment.
So from a TV experience, it's terrible because you can just see so many empty seats. It just sounds empty. So for me, I think it's closer to Etihad where I think it's in the needs improvement and then with a big fat asterisk of needs improvement very quickly.
Here's where I'll meet you halfway. I think it goes in needs improvement. I don't think it's quite bin territory. I think we put it at the bottom of the rectangular stadiums in needs improvement, which is behind Dolphins, because Dolphins is the one that we would rather see Brisbane playing out of in the future, but ahead of, Mars Stadium in Ballarat and ahead of Adelaide Oval and ahead of Perth Stadium. Yep.
No, I'd agree with that. And it is tough because, as we see, we could get into the whole big picture of the A-League, but you see attendances drop off, so I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. When it's full, it's great, but I just think because they play there so often, I think that distinguishes it from Homebush, and I think that sort of harms it.
Yeah, look, a fair comment for sure. Needs improvement. By all means, Brisbane fans, give us shit in the comment section below if you love Suncorp and hope you do fill it out every single week. We do jump a little bit further ahead now as well. From one very big, large, perhaps overpacked stadium to a much smaller kind of boutique arena, which a lot of people have called for in the league itself. This is Lockhart Oval. Sydney FC played there a couple of different times in Lockhart in New South Wales. 20,000 capacity. It's hard to see with this picture. It does actually have this kind of like rim of, I think it's about 10 or 12 tiers of seating all the way around. What I will note is the A-League configuration is a little bit different to the NRL one. The sidelines do come all the way to the edge, and I think the goals come right up to the edge as well, so it is a little bit better fitting in terms of the overall playing surface. Have you been to Lockhart previously, Bran?
I haven't, no, but I would definitely be keen to get there soon. For me, I think this is more appropriate as a home of Sydney FC than Allianz. I think this is where we start getting into the nitty-picky, where it's like, in terms of stadium quality, Allianz is better than Leichhardt Oval, just in the same way that Allianz is better than Jubilee. But in terms of suitability, I think that's where Leichhardt and Jubilee claw a lot back, like in terms of being a better size. I think in terms of atmosphere, again, the fans seem to love it. It seems to have, more of that community vibe rather than playing in a big empty stadium. So for me, I think this is decent. I think it's sort of emerged as a better home for Sydney FC than Allianz. But again, we were talking about suitability for winter sports and even summer sports, there's not a lot of cover there. So it's a tough one to sort of find a midpoint, What do you think?
Where I'm struggling, so I think it's a fair point to put both Lockhart and Kogarah next to each other. I think Kogarah is just on the other side of that, but then the point that you just kind of made, their suitability to Sydney FC, does that mean we have to then put them ahead of Allianz? I think they sit together quite nicely, and by all means, Sydney FC fans, let us know your own opinions in the comment section below or on Twitter or wherever else you can reach us. But does the conversation, as you've said it, and Allianz's suitability for Sydney, does that then put it behind those two stadiums and it drops down the decent list?
Well, I think all three are the same. Where's Campbelltown? Where have we got Campbelltown?
Campbelltown would be just behind Allianz in that list. It's the one sitting just here.
Okay, well, I reckon it goes alongside there, to be honest. Like, in my opinion, I think Allianz, Jubilee and Leichhardt would be in the same tier. They'd have different factors bumping them up and dropping them down. So I think that's my opinion. What are you feeling?
I think that's okay, and I think they all sit in the decent category. I don't think any of them hit anywhere near All-Star, and I would think...
No. I definitely agree on that.
I would think it's probably, and by all means, I could be wrong, I think it's Kogarah, which I've been to, Lockhart, which I've been to, but was for a concert. It wasn't for an A-League game, so I don't know how much I can communicate that. Mm-hmm. And Allianz that I've been to, which was actually a good, enjoyable stadium to actually see stuff in.
I think that's the thing that's hard to distinguish, where Allianz is definitely a better stadium, but suitability and atmosphere, it sort of falls off a little bit. I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, I think because it's a rectangular stadium, having like a roundness to it doesn't necessarily suit the seating for Allianz. Mm. And It's the same for Kogarah, and that's maybe the one thing you'd say for Jubilee. It is, similar to Coopers when we talk about Coopers. It's got 4 stands around each side. They're right up against onto the ground. It's a tough one. I think we leave it as it is and just say Kogarah is the top of the Sydney options, Jubilee's the second, Allianz is the third. But potentially this is something that we revisit at a later date and see if we still feel that way. And hopefully Sydney FC fans can let us know their thoughts and opinions. There's about 15 of them that collaborate on the channel. I'm sure they'll let us know before too long anyway. All right, I think that's a good spot. But again, like some of these ones are really tough to actually split. Now we jump to the stadium that I nearly introduced earlier, McDonald Jones Stadium. I haven't actually been to this one. It's the only of the original A-League stadiums that I've never actually been to. It is based in Newcastle, the home of the Newcastle Jets. It seats 33,000 people in its key configuration. That is including opening up all of the hills and stuff that you see behind the edges here. Firstly, have you travelled to this stadium, and what were your thoughts and opinions on it?
So I have driven past it. So a few years ago, went on a road trip with a few mates, and we went to games in Sydney, we went to games in Gosford, and we drove to Newcastle. And then as we drove in, the Jets were playing, and we couldn't believe that for, I think, a game, the schedule got changed and moved. So we had the opportunity to go and didn't. Have driven past it, so that counts for nothing, though, really. For me, I think it sits in the decent category. I think it's very similar to Gosford Central Coast. I think it's not quite as pretty as Central Coast, but we could say that, let's be honest, about every single stadium. So I think it's good in terms of suitability. It's possibly a little bit big, but that's also, down to the success of the franchise that is the Newcastle Jets as well, rather than a dig on the stadium. When the Jets were good, when they finished second and they hosted the grand final, and it was packed and it was buzzing. So for me, I think it's decent.
Yeah, I think it goes next to just behind, Gosford Stadium. I think that is, the best way to try and represent it. I think, when we talk about Central Coast Stadium and its suitability for the Mariners, I think the same conversation applies to Newcastle. I think it is the sweet spot for where they're at right now. And we had the same conversation with Gold Coast and it being perhaps a little bit too big. It's everything that Newcastle could need now and going into the next 10 years.
And sorry, I was just sorry to interrupt, but I was just going to say, it's such a hard thing to judge with the A-League, because when you look at the teams where they are now, when the teams are not competitive, the attendance falls off. But when the teams are up and about, then Newcastle do need a stadium that hits 20 to 25,000 people. We see that with the Victory. Like last year they were terrible and they were getting 12, 13,000 fans to games, and all of a sudden Amy Park doesn't look that great. So a lot of it is based on the team's on-field performance to sort of drive that attendance. So it's like it's really tough for A-League teams when you need to cater to both ends. And it's similar with what we were talking with Suncorp with Brisbane. You need to cater for when your team's winning 3 grand finals in 4 seasons, and then you need to go, well, actually, we're not so good anymore. I don't know.
I'd be curious, just to close off on the Newcastle part, if this like kind of hill area, which is a New South Wales obsession, as you said, if they could put temporary seating in there and make it like 40,000.
Yeah, possibly. But
we'll
like...
see.
But the hills seem to have rave reviews. People seem to love being able to like just sit back and lounge, and I think that would be like a perfect sort of vibe kind of mix kind of thing. Like when you're talking about community stadiums, it feels like you're at a community stadium while you're at a peak top tier sporting facility. Sort of best of both worlds.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think, as we've said, it sits alongside Central Coast as being perfect for a regional area and a regional team. And I think it sits kind of snugly just in between Gold Coast and Central Coast in terms of the overall decent quality. Potentially, if we get to a point where Central Coast and Newcastle are performing incredibly well and selling out their stadium every week, maybe Newcastle and Central Coast fans have a right to get in the comment section below and let us know that it should be an all-star stadium. I don't think it's quite that tier at the moment, but... No. I think there's potential there, and I think it is perfect for what they need right now. We'll see if that changes in the next couple of days, weeks, months, whatever else. Jumping forward to the NIB Stadium based in Perth. It is now known as, I think, the HBF Stadium. I visited it back when it was NIB. It's good. It's all right. It's rectangular. It is the main rectangular stadium in Perth. It does host a lot of concerts, other stuff like that. The one criticism, and we spoke about it earlier, you mentioned when we were talking about Coopers, is that it doesn't have a variety of shade. And as a summer stadium, that's not terrible. But as a winter stadium, does that provide enough? But I have a feeling that we're going to probably repeat a lot of the similar conversation that we just had about Newcastle in terms of HBF's stadium suitability for Perth Glory. What are your thoughts on it? And have you been there before?
I've never been there before, would love to go. Another thing that I have heard, I have got a mate who's a Perth Glory fan, and he has said that when you sit on the wing, I think he's a member and he had seats on the wing, and the sun sets, he said it's right in your eyes. Yeah. So in terms of a suitability point of view, that's a bit of a detractor. For me, though, I think I agree with what you're saying in terms of it's similar to the Jets and it's similar to Central Coast. I, though, would argue that this is almost top tier because in terms of stadium quality, they have recently redeveloped it. And I think, you've been there. What was it like? Was it sort of top tier level quality, or were you there before the Reno?
No, well before the Reno. We're going back 6-7 years now. I went in summer when it was stinking hot, and Perth heat is quite different to heat in a lot of the different regions. I think this one... Look, if I was going with my initial gut feeling, it's in the decent category, but I could definitely see on a full day in winter, cooler weather, not as much of that, sunset stuff coming into it with the sun going down earlier, it being an all-star potential stadium. There are, it's an incomplete stadium as well. It's not fully encapsulated all the way around. There are a couple of gaps in and around the seating, as you can kind of see here, particularly in and around the corners. Yep. I would be putting it towards the top end of decent. I could be convinced if you can make a case and sell it to me for it to be in that all-star tier.
Well, I think in terms, again, I haven't been there, but I think one of the big things that I like about the redevelopment, obviously in terms of the quality, it's going to be right up there. I think a big thing in terms of the atmosphere that boosts it is the fact that, and the way they were able to incorporate the shed into the new redevelopment as well, because that's, the home of the Perth active area, and it's sort of like the hub for activity and atmosphere there. So I think that their ability to keep that as part of it and keep that identity really sort of bumps it up. I think it's, even if a stadium does go into top tier, like we were saying with Amy Park, there's still, it's not perfect. I think there are things that could be improved, but I think it's either bottom, top tier. Well, I think it's top tier if we've got Adelaide in there.
I could meet you halfway and go bottom of top tier. Maybe this comes up more when we talk about like when we rank our active supporter bases and stuff. Yeah, I think the maintaining of the shed is a weird thing. It's like this old boys club of certain people that they can't really grow and expand any further than what it already is. So like there's an accessibility portion around the shed. There's the fact that it is the home of the worst football chant anywhere in the history of football, which is the goalkeeper, your shit chant, which is just, it drives me mental. But I think as an overall quality of the ground, the other three areas are good. And I think potentially moving into a winter competition, this may be one of the venues that actually suits that site and that location a little bit better. So I think bottom of All-Star.
Yeah, I'm happy with that because I think it's better than Newcastle, better than Central Coast. I think it's on the same level as Hindmarsh. It might not have quite the same atmosphere, but suitability and TV experience would be the same, and the quality I would think is better than Hindmarsh.
I'm going to go, I think bottom of All-Star is a good balance. It's just alongside Hindmarsh. I would put Coopers above HBF if you were asking me. Yep,
I probably would too, yep.
Cool. All right, let's go with that. And a third party joins the All-Star tiered list. The next one, the infamous Cake Tin, now known as Sky Stadium, over in Wellington. I have been to this one. It's all right. It's nothing super interesting or exciting. It is an oval stadium, and we've been very consistent, I think, in our judgment of oval stadiums and how we want them to participate. The really unique thing about this, when we spoke about pretty much every other New Zealand stadium that we went through, this is the only one that's really a proper oval shape. Every other one that was available and accessible had a rectangle. We know in Wellington they do have NRL sides. There are potential sharing options. What are your thoughts? And one, have you travelled to Sky Stadium? And two, what are your thoughts on it as an overall football venue?
I haven't travelled there, but my thoughts on it as an overall venue, I mean, my first impressions for where to put it on the tier list is definitely needs improvement. And again, borderline in the bin. I think as a future home, I mean, obviously it's a current home of the Wellington Phoenix, but I think if it's going to be where they're going to play all the time, I think it needs to go in the bin. If it's going to be, if Wellington have plans of, building or moving into a purpose-built rectangular stadium in the future, I think that's going to be far more suitable. Of course, there's a ton of logistics and, economic stuff and everything to go into whether or not that will ever happen. But I just think you're so far away, and it's just, I don't think it's good. I don't.
And it's not, we didn't really talk about it with Marvel, but when you talk about the TV viewing experience, it suffers from the same thing that it is cavernous. You feel like you're miles from it watching it on a television screen, which shouldn't happen. And it gets the same seagull issues, where if a seagull can plan a flight pattern across a stadium to go and get a chip over in row G, aisle F on the other side, and it flies between you and the camera, then you've probably got too much distance in terms of the overall viewing experience. So I would put it in get in the bin category.
Yep.
But, again, like, we could be corrected. There could be issues with other Wellington grounds. I think if Wellington, realistically, and we talk about sometimes when we speak about Wellington, their metrics for staying in the division, getting themselves, not a purpose built specifically for them, but getting themselves into a rectangular stadium that they can call their own and can develop their own thing and their own real kind of culture with, other than taking off their shirts in the 80th minute, then, that's a big ticket item that I think they could look at, potentially getting themselves a more suitable ground for their crowd sizes available in and around the Wellington area. So I think get in the bin is fair.
Yeah. And I agree. Well, I think, they host big sporting events there as well. The Hurricanes, the Super Rugby team, they play all their home games at the Cake Tin. The All Whites, when they were playing Peru in the World Cup,
their playoff final
qualifiers. Yeah, that was at the Cake Tin as well. So you just see stuff there, and none of it looks good. The big plus for them is the capacity, but similar to Suncorp, where as an everyday home for the Phoenix, the suitability is incredibly low.
Yeah, and I think what hurts it and what burns it the most is that Eden Park is just kind of sitting there taunting it further up in the tier list, just as a very good rectangular venue with good capacity, good availability. Obviously, it's in Auckland; it's a different city, but like New Zealand can do it. It's weird that they don't do it in Wellington. But by all means,
I don't know why.
Yeah, and Kiwi fans, if there are other issues with stadiums in Wellington, shared NRL assets, shared rugby assets, let us know in the comment section down below. We are always looking to grow and improve our lists, but yeah, I think getting the bin as far as oval stuff is concerned for the future of Wellington and New Zealand football. That does actually bring us to the last one on the list, and one of the most recent, and perhaps I think we'll probably think along the similar lines with this, potentially a new standard for football stadia in and around Australia and in and around the A-League and New Zealand football as well. It is Bankwest Stadium, Western Sydney Stadium as it is also known. It's only been open a couple of seasons. Wanderers, unfortunately, due to COVID, whatever else, haven't had as many happy memories in this stadium as they would potentially like. It's sitting perfectly balanced at 30,000, which I think is a great overall number for the league itself in terms of capacity. What are your initial thoughts, feelings on Bankwest Stadium?
I think it's possibly the most overrated stadium in the league.
Big one.
Put it in the bin. No, just kidding. Just kidding. I think this is above All-Star. I think you said it in the intro. This is probably God tier. Like it's the newest. It's the most purpose built. So like if we're talking the stadium quality being so new, the stadium quality is right up there. Snazzy things with the lighting as well. It all looks super fancy. Atmosphere is sort of a little bit of an unknown because the Wanderers haven't been super good. They haven't been able to like jam it through, but there's been a bunch of rugby league games. They've had finals there as well. And, it's buzzing. And everyone who I've heard speak about it, who's been to games there, has absolutely raved about it. So atmosphere, top tier, suitability, top tier, TV experience, top tier. I can't see how this could be anything other than the best stadium for the A-League in Australia.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the only thing it's missing is a successful side playing in it, and then we're going to see the best that stadium has to offer as far as football is concerned.
And another thing as well, potentially revolutionary, like we saw with the Wanderers in the active area trialling safe seating. It's got that ability to have safe seating. Yeah, safe standing behind the goals, which is we're seeing that becoming more and more of a trend in Europe, in particular in Germany, and for the Wanderers to sort of be at the front of that as well. And the red and black block are huge in terms of atmosphere and their active support and that sort of stuff. So I think that it's really perfect. I don't know how to say anything other than that, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it sits alone as the best in the league. And I'm sure Western Sydney Wanderers are celebrating wildly wherever they're watching from. But yeah, I think it is now. I think for a little while, here's what I'll say, right? If you go back kind of 10, 15 years when Amy Park was being built, it tried to do too much and tried to be too universal and too multi-purpose. I think Bankwest has kind of hit the nail on the head. It is a fantastic football venue, and NRL doesn't need that much different from football. So yeah, I think they've done a fantastic job, and obviously Wanderers fans are very fortunate to be able to travelling back to that stadium every week. They did suffer. They had Spotless. They had a few other terrible away trips while it was being built, but I think most of them would agree that it all worked out in the end, and they have a fantastic venue that they now get to call their own. So we're going to quickly recap. This is your last opportunity and chance to see if there are any that jump out at you that we need to move around. God tier, Bankwest Stadium, Amy Park, Cooper Stadium, HBF Stadium. I think I'm comfortable with that, and I think I'm comfortable with the order in which we've put it, which is Bankwest at the top, Amy Park second, Cooper's third, and HBF fourth. You cool with that?
Yep, and I think we've had a couple of discussions, and we've each made some good points, and you've changed my mind a bit on Adelaide Oval, and I did the same in Perth. Adelaide Oval, Cooper Stadium. So I think I'm comfortable with where that list sits.
In the decent category, we've got Hindmarsh Stadium, Eden Park, Central Coast Stadium, McDonald Jones Stadium in Newcastle, Robina Stadium in the Gold Coast, and a few others. Mainly that Sydney FC category is the next lot, which is Kogarah, Jubilee, and Allianz. I think they stay together. I think Campbelltown we leave where it is. I think Forsyth Bar I'm purely putting there just to placate myself and my love of that stadium. What I would suggest is I think we put potentially Hindmarsh behind Robina, and we put Eden Park behind Hindmarsh, and move Central Coast to be the top of decent, Newcastle to be the top of decent, Gold Coast to be the top of decent.
Yep, I would do that. I'd agree with that. I reckon, the big disclaimer with Hindmarsh and Eden Park is they are temporary venues. So when they are used for the purpose in which they're designed for, which is big crowds, they're top tier. They'd be right up there with Amy Park. But, if they're used every week and they're not, but if they were, they would not be suitable. And so I think it's, they've got an asterisk of they're not used very often. So I think that reordering that you've done just then, I think that's really good to have Central Coast, Newcastle, Gold Coast, and I think we're in agreement there that they are all very similar. I know Central Coast is first, but I think you could change the order and have them in any order, and we'd say that's a pretty good representation.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with the decent tier as it currently sits. Moving down to needs improvement, and this is kind of a mixed bag of a few different things, a lot of ovals appearing in there. We've got Dolphin Stadium at the top, Suncorp Stadium just behind that. We have the Mars Stadium in Ballarat, Adelaide Oval, Optus Oval, or Optus Stadium, I think it's called, Perth Oval. Then the next one was, I've forgotten the name of it, I have to bring it back up. It was New Zealand Knights ground back in the day. AMI Stadium in Christchurch. AMI Stadium in Christchurch. Then we have, what was that one? That is the one down in Launceston, is Mars Stadium. No, sorry, apologies, Aurora Stadium.
Yep.
Then we have the New Zealand Knights home ground that I mentioned a moment ago, North Harbour Stadium in Auckland, and then rounding out that list, Dairy Farmer Stadium in Townsville in Queensland. Any of those that you think need to move up, down, or just move about in their general order?
The Christchurch one, I mean, you could potentially put that up to decent as to being in the same sort of category as the Dunedin Stadium, but it is a bit more oval, so I think you could argue that it could be higher, but I'm pretty comfortable with where that sits, to be honest. The one that still just jumps out at me is Suncorp. I still just can't decide whether or not
this is probably,
or if it's good there. But
this is probably the first of many tier lists that we'll do at various points. I will happily give you Suncorp in the bin. Yeah. I don't care enough about it.
I'm not even sure if it should be in the bin though. That's the thing. It's hard to decide myself. Like when we're talking about Wellington, I'm like, oh, the suitability's terrible. I keep thinking about Suncorp. I go, well, yeah, the suitability is terrible. But then it's a rectangle. But then if it's a rectangle, I reckon put it back up. I don't think it's in the bin. I reckon put it back up.
Do you think we need to slide it anywhere different? I can throw it behind a couple of different stadiums if you like. I can bring AMI a little bit further up. There's a few different things we could do, but I mean, we could probably argue those placements all day.
Yeah, 100%, and then, you argue AMI where they play maybe once, or I don't even remember the last time. Sorry, pardon me. I don't even remember the last time Wellington played there. So Suncorp, definitely needs improvement, and Brisbane just find a better permanent home, I think, is the asterisk on that one.
I don't think many Brisbane fans would disagree. And then we have our Get in the Bin category, and I'll be honest with you, Brian, I don't think any are crawling their way out. It is the Cake Tin over in Wellington, Marvel Stadium in Melbourne, Spotless Stadium in Western Sydney, Subiaco Oval in Perth, North Sydney Oval in Sydney. What was that last one? GMHBA, and then the worst of the bunch, which is Palmerston North Arena Manawatu, which is a name I kept forgetting as we were going through each of them. I think they pretty comfortably stay down in that Get in the Bin category.
Yep. I think the one thing we do is I think we drop Spotless. I think that goes to very last. I would rather go watch a game at Palmerston than at Spotless. I think Palmerston, because it fits into that regional, unique kind of venue, I think it gets a little bit more of a pass mark, whereas Spotless, you just go, nah, no good.
Okay, all right. I will drop that one to be the bottom of the list. And yeah, I think that pretty much closes out all of the stadiums. I think they're all sitting in the right categories. I'm comfortable and proud enough of this list. We will see if in 12 months' time it looks very different. We'll see if in 2 years' time it looks very different. Hopefully there are new stadiums, more specialised boutique venues available to us. Brian, thank you so much for joining me, mate. I know we have flown through the time. It is very rapidly gone beyond the initial hour that I think we were going to speak about it, but it's always good to sit down with you and chat all things football. If people wanted to check you out, what is the best place to find you? Be that across Twitter, Instagram, whatever else, and of course the reserveteam.com.au website where we're now all hanging out each and every week.
That's it. Yeah, reserveteam.com.au will have links to my social media. I'm just at Branson Gibson on Twitter. A bit of a weird one, spelled S-E-N, not S-O-N. Thanks, Dad. Thanks for that. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And it's been a great time just getting to sit here and talk football, mate. We could do it literally all day. I reckon we could do 24/7. We could find plenty of stuff to talk about. And I reckon we could just argue and compromise and change each other's minds 50 more times on different stadiums, on different points. It's been really good fun, mate.
No, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining. I'm sure we'll no doubt do it again tomorrow or later this week or whatever else a future schedule actually has us in. If you want to continue supporting the reserve team, either via the website or here on the YouTube channel or live via Twitch, once we get our live stream set up, you can check out the links down towards the bottom framing of this video or in the description below. If you want to help support the channel, see it grow, when people look for A-League content, you want ours to appear higher in their search options, you can drop a like on this video. It does help celebrate the first few episodes on the channel. You can also subscribe to be kept up to date on all of our future episodes, which we'll continue to release right all the way through the A-League season, and some good build-up hype stuff happening as we're in the off-season at the moment as well. But more than anything, from myself, from Bran, thank you so much all for watching, and we'll see you guys again next time.